My first guest today is Senator Patty Murray, the first woman to serve as Senate President pro tempore and chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. She is the lead sponsor of the Paycheck Fairness Act and a leader in efforts to expand access to child care and paid family leave. Welcome, Senator Murray. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be with you. Thanks so much for asking.
So I want to get started by talking about your position as chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee this Congress. That is a very influential and important committee, and it gives you a lot of influence in shaping the congressional agenda and conversation. How are you planning to use your position to urge action to advance gender equity and equality?
Grace, I have been talking about the issues affecting women since I came to the Senate many years ago. And now that I am the chair of the Appropriations Committee, the committee that decides the funding across the board for the United States of America, I'm bringing issues that brought me to Congress to the center of the table in the discussions that are important to families across our country. How do we make sure that every one of us, women and men, are capable of having a good job, taking care of our families, participating in our communities? And those issues essentially are what people call women's issues. How do we have childcare? How do we have pay equity? How do we have family leave so everyone can participate in this economy and make sure their family has what they need?
Now, I want to dig into some policy specifics. You mentioned childcare. I know as a congressional reporter that one of the things that you are most famous for is being an advocate for childcare for decades and champion of legislation in the Senate. And last year, you and Senator Tim Kaine introduced a proposal on childcare policy that was ultimately not included in the Inflation Reduction Act reconciliation bill. Do you think there's a chance to address issues of childcare in this Congress, and what would that action look like?
Well, this is such a critical question. I have long championed that for women to be able to participate in our economy, we need to have a childcare system in the United States of America that actually works for families, that is affordable, that is close by their workplace, and that takes care of our children in a smart way. And then you can go do your job if you have that sense that your kids are doing well too. And I've championed this for a long time. We were so close last year in getting a bill passed as part of the reconciliation package. And at the end of the day, did not have quite the 51 votes we needed. But that doesn't mean we lost. We have gained so much. I mean, when I first came to Congress to talk about childcare and these issues impacting women, I was the one voice in the room. And oftentimes when I would ask people, please help me out, speak up, they would say, don't want to bring that issue up because my boss might think that this is a problem for me and I won't get promoted or I won't get hired. So I want to be quiet about it. People aren't quiet anymore. CEOs come in and talk to me about the economic need to provide childcare so that they can have employees. Families come into me constantly, communities who tell me they are childcare deserts. They can't grow their community and their own economy because they don't have the facilities. So I believe this issue has come a long way, and we're going to keep fighting till we get it over the finish line. The one thing we were able to do last year is in the appropriations bill, we increased dramatically the funding for the Child Care Development Block Grant that helps supports community child care centers. But we are not there yet until we know that we have qualified people who can work in our child care centers, that we have the physical centers that we need close to where people work, and that we are providing subsidies for families so they can afford child care. Childcare is too expensive. It doesn't help you get a job. So we have to attack this from all places. And where we have come from is a silent problem to a highly public problem to where people across the economic structure are now talking about why this is essential for America to be able to improve its economy and be competitive in a global world.
I'm so glad that you brought up when you were first elected and the changes that you've seen because you were first elected to the Senate in 1992, which was called the Year of the Woman, because for the first time, so many female senators were elected. And it's been 30 years, a lot has changed. So, since you've been in Congress, what improvements have you seen for women in terms of pay equity or childcare or these other topics that are traditionally considered women's issues?
Oh, Grace, yeah, when I first ran for Congress, I ran because I looked out at the United States Senate, happened to be in the Clarence Thomas hearings, and I went, oh my God, who's there being my voice? Who's speaking out on the issues that are important to me? I don't see anybody who is really talking about the issues impacting families like mine across the country, which is what motivated me to run. Remember, I first got into the politics in the first place, running for my own state legislature because I was fighting for childcare and preschool in my home state, and I was told by a male legislator that I couldn't make a difference. I was just a mom in tennis shoes. And I went out and I fought hard, and we got that program funded along with a lot of other families. And that being put down as just a mom in tennis shoes has motivated me my entire career to fight for those moms and dads in tennis shoes and all kinds of shoes to have a voice at the table. And that is the big difference that I see now. Before I was here, there were 2 women in the United States Senate. Year of the woman, the year I was elected, 6 women. We now have almost a quarter of the Senate as women. So every hearing, every space that we're in, there are women at the table. Now, why is this important? Because this is an issue that women are not afraid to bring up. They know that unless they talk about it and bring it up and fight for it, it won't happen. And now, by the way, we're having men echo what we're saying because they realize how important this is. Tim Kaine co-sponsored this with me in the Senate last year. So we have broadened our support, we've broadened the issue, and we are talking loudly about it. So that is what will get us across the finish line at the end of the day.
I am someone who often wears tennis shoes while in the halls of Congress, so I personally have appreciated your leadership just on the tennis shoe front because it makes it a lot easier for women reporters and women members of Congress to be able to wear comfortable shoes in those marble halls.
We run
So
all
I
over
also
meeting to meeting, not miss votes and everything else. And my tennis shoes have not just worn me well politically because people identify with that, but because I can get to where I need to be in a really job that requires me to be in a lot of places.
yes, and I appreciate that as someone who has followed in your tennis shoe footsteps. So I also wanted to ask you about the Paycheck Fairness Act, which you reintroduced earlier this month. Along with access to childcare, we know that the wage gap plays a significant role in workforce gender inequity. So how do we address these issues and make it easier for women to enter and then advance in the workplace?
The paycheck fairness is such a critical issue. Everybody needs to understand that when you get paid less than your counterparts, that affects your family, how much you can spend on things. It's not just not fair, it's an economic issue. Now, I remember many years ago introducing this for the first time with Senator Barbara Mikulski, one of those 2 women who was here before me, no longer with us, but she is at my back still every day fighting for this. Because if you don't get paid for the same job, the same wage as your male counterparts, you bring home less to your family. It means you might not be able to buy that pair of shoes for your kids or send them to college in a way that you want to. But over a lifetime, when you have earned less every single year, that affects your retirement and how much you are able to take care of yourself in your senior years as well. So to me, this is a critical part of our economy, making sure that people are paid equitably and equally so we can all be what we need to be for our families, our communities, and for our future.
So, paycheck equity and childcare, these are such important issues. But we are in a Congress right now where the Senate may be controlled by Democrats, but the House has a Republican majority. So if there's anything that happens on these fronts, it's going to have to be bipartisan. Do you think there are any particular areas where there could be bipartisan support? And do you have hope of something actually coming through this divided Congress?
Well, what I intend to do as chair of the Appropriations Committee is to put this on the top of the agenda across the board. Look, I had a conversation with Secretary Raimondo, Secretary of Commerce, a few days ago about how she is using funds that is going out. We passed the Chips and Science Act. We're starting to build facilities here to produce chips. As part of getting those grants, she's requiring those companies to tell us how they're going to have a child care or take care of the children of their workers. So we are broadening this in many ways. And there's, I think, real hope to get things done like that, to make sure that we are supporting funding in as strongest way as possible. Are we going to get the big policies done with the Republicans in the House who don't even want to do a budget? It's going to be tough. But you know what? You win when you're here, when you're fighting for something, and when you don't give up. And that is what I intend to do.
Think something that viewers may not realize is that this year marks the first time that the chair and ranking member of the Senate Appropriations Committee and of the House Appropriation Committee, all four of you are women. And there have been a lot of news stories about that. And at first it can seem perhaps a little trite to say, well, having women in those positions makes difference, but I think it really does make a difference to have four women of both parties making those critical decisions about funding and appropriations. So does that element of this conversation factor into how you're going to be approaching appropriations for the next couple of years?
I think there's a tremendous opportunity with four women at the top of the Appropriations Committee in Congress for the first time for us to really focus on these issues that affect families in our communities every single day. Look, being in office and fighting for policies, you bring your lived experience and who you talk to and what's important to you to the table every single day. Men understand this issue, but it's not one that they bring to the forefront the very first time. They want to talk about charts and graphs and big numbers and all the other things that they want to talk about. When we're at the table, we're talking about, first of all, what our priorities are for our families and our communities. And secondly, and importantly, women want to get the job done. We don't come here to say, well, we'll debate that next year, or we'll run on this in the next Congress. We really want to accomplish this. And I have seen that over my time in Congress for a long time, that women in general, at this point in time, really bring to the table the will and the desire to actually do the job, get the work done, and have accomplishments. And I think that will help us in this year when we're trying to write our budgets in a really challenging time.
I would be remiss if I did not ask you about abortion. We saw the Dobbs decision come down last year that has already had far-reaching ramifications, not just politically, but also in terms of abortion access across the country. So how do you think it will continue to shape the political landscape? And what, if anything, can you do in Congress to address this issue?
I think this is the biggest bell ringer I have seen in my lifetime to women who have fought hard to make sure that their choice, if they are to go to work, is to be able to work in an economically competitive way, that they have the skills, the salary, the ability, like family leave, to be able to have children and to be competitive. And for this Supreme Court to insert itself and take away a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions is not just a health decision, which it really is, but it is an economic decision for women. And this is just really going to be highlighted until it's fixed, because women are capable, they're smart, they want to participate in our economy, they want to take care of their families. But when someone else controls their health care and their decisions about when they are going to have a family, it has a huge impact on them. I saw it in my own election in the last cycle that women came out to vote. They are not going to sit back and be silent. And yet, here in Congress, this very day, we have Republicans who are still going after more extreme measures to take away a woman's health care decision. We are still fighting those battles because Republicans have not learned the lesson that women vote, they care about this issue, and they do not want a politician deciding their own personal, family, health, economic decisions. So this is far from over.
I want to follow up on something you just mentioned there about abortion access being an economic issue. Could you go into a little more detail about what you mean there and how this does affect women economically?
You know, I have talked to numerous young women who are in college, who are in the early stages of their career, who want a family. They desperately want a family, but they want to be able to care for them and do it in a way that economically works for their family. If someone else is saying, "Oh no, sorry, you have to be pregnant," then you're not going to get your college education. You're not going to start your job out right. You're going to have costs that you can't afford and haven't planned for. That should be their decision. And right now, that is taken away from them. And, I just find it appalling. It's an economic decision for families. It is absolutely a healthcare decision. I could talk for 20 minutes here about women who have come to me who are pregnant wannabe and are in a very terrible experience in their pregnancy, can't find a doctor or a facility to help them with a healthcare emergency. It is a healthcare decision, but it is also an economic decision, and it impacts people's life, well-being, and health. And that's how women see it today.
You just mentioned your own election, this past election cycle. I know that we are here in March, late March of 2023, so we've got a little while until the 2024 election. But I think there's some skepticism that the Dobbs decision will continue to be a motivating factor for the next year and a half and going forward. Sounds to me like you would disagree and that you think this will continue to be an important issue, but I was wondering how you think this will play into elections going forward.
I think this is a huge factor. It makes a difference who your elected official is in Congress and at the local level on whether they agree with you that you should make your own economic and health personal decisions about pregnancy. And right now in the Congress, last night, we had Republican senators on the floor of the Senate holding up nominations of military personnel because they were mad at the military for saying that if you are pregnant and need to end your pregnancy because of rape or incest, that they will pay for you to go to another state to be able to do that, just your travel expenses. And Republicans are saying, no, no, if you're in Alabama and you're in the military and you're in a military facility, tough on you. I mean, this is appalling to me. We have a judge right now who's about to make a decision from Texas that will impact every woman in this country about whether they will be able to get a prescription for a product that most women use in abortions today and take that away from women, despite the fact that FDA approved this medication 20 years ago as safe and effective. We are about to have a judge decide whether Americans can use that across the board in this country, even in pro-choice states. So, Republicans can't stop. They want to keep on going every step of the way till they control women's bodies from every perspective. I see it personally, up close and front, in every negotiation I have here in Congress, in simple things like whether or not somebody should have a military increase, or whether or not our VA can provide health care for our women veterans. This is not going to go away because I will tell you, I see Republicans whose sole role and sole goal in their personal life is to take away women's rights at every step of the way. And we have got to step up and fight back in the same passion. That's what I'm doing. And I think that's what voters want.
I believe I have time for one more very quick question. I want to ask you, there's a bipartisan task force in the House that is working on paid leave policy. And I know that you have a lot of disagreements with Republicans, as you have just been outlining. But do you think that paid leave may be an area where there could be action on a bipartisan basis in this
I would
Congress?
so love to see that. That would make my day. And that tells you how this issue has changed in the time I've been in Congress, where there's actual discussions with Republicans and Democrats about a paid leave policy. Now, I want to make sure it works. I don't want it just to be words on a paper, an empty promise, and that takes work and it takes good policy. But this is an issue that when I first came to the Senate 30 years ago, we passed the first bill I passed when I was here and helped pass. Ted Kennedy was the lead co-sponsor, was unpaid leave. So we have that today, but it doesn't do anybody a lot of good if you don't get paid. They need to make sure that people get paid in order to take care of a child when they're born or a sick relative who, no one should have to make that choice. And we have seen that this policy makes a difference for businesses, for families, for communities. Let's respect people when they have a child and make sure they have paid leave so they can bond with that child and do the critical things they need to do to have that family get started. I would love to see bipartisan work happen on this, and I will keep working every day to make sure that that is a focus we can all work towards.
Senator Patty Murray, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.